infrared, right? Them being able to see in some sort of infrared, because if Tyrannosaurus rex is a big chicken, then when chickens and birds and stuff, and they can see in infrared as well.
Well, I know one thing was just discovered last week. We've been trying to figure out forever how birds utilize the magnetic grid on Earth. And we thought it was magnetite in the brain. We thought it was a bunch of different things. But apparently it's actually this chemical inside of their eyeballs. They can actually see the magnetic grid. They can see it.
Yeah, they can see
there.
it.
Field lines and everything.
Yeah.
Welcome to the April 29th edition of The Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have David, Buddy, Heather, Jim, and Robert. We discuss eyes and vision and how some can see more colors than others. Then, a discussion of the senses and the basics of what was considered science in the past. Don't forget to like and subscribe below.
So we can take this protein now, and I assume within the next 5 years or so, probably less, we'll be able to take this protein and insert it in our eyes and be able to see this frickin' field, dude.
Whoa, hold on, Dr. Moreau. Okay.
Yeah, hold on.
We use raster cones in our eyes, right? And that's how we see. One's gradation, one's like hue variance. So there's these people that have, like, they call them tetravision or tetracolor or something like that. Like they have
4 rods or cones or whatever.
Yeah. So they're able to see like this incredible expansion of variance that
very rare. Apparently, like 4 people in the world have that.
Right.
Yeah. It was color blindness is basically only having 2, but well, actually you have 3, but one of them is really weak, so that's why you can sort of shift it with those glasses so people can see colors, which is nice. I'm glad they solved that problem. But yeah, the tetra, they have 4 cones, so they basically have because each cone gives you a multiplier. It's sort of like every 8 bits on a computer. So you have 8-bit, you can see 256 colors. With 16, you can see 30 or 64,000 colors or something like that. And then, of course, once you get to 24-bit or 32-bit or something like that, it's so much color your eye can't pick it out. But the people who are with that vision certainly could. They can tell, what you think is just one solid color, they will see a gradient. So that's they have that much more detail apparently. So, I guess it's 12%. No,
12%.
You're kidding me. I thought it was like 4 people in the world. Bullshit.
Oh no, I thought that it was a greater amount, and I was also wondering, like, how do you get tested for this? Because like I went to art school, right, and we would paint, and we would have to do that to pick out the variance of color within something when you're painting it, because that's how you bring up the layers.
Right.
And some people were a lot better at it than others. Some just looking at the model and saying there's yellow in that shadow with a hint of pink right here, but it's really all flesh tone, right? But to be able to see that, and it was, I don't want to say that you could tell the difference between men and women in the class, but it was very obvious who could see it and who couldn't, and who could translate it and who couldn't. And then it was weird because even the people who could translate it and then recreate it and show you, the people who couldn't see it and take it out, they were like blocking. It was weird the way they would like block in the colors and then bring it up in blocks, as opposed to people who could see the layers blending up on top of one another. And it was really interesting to watch how people would interpret what the colors in the light and in the things that they saw with what was, how they were able to function and handle the materials that they were using. It's really, really interesting. I'd love to know how you get tested for that.
Well, actually, like I just said, we should be able to test right online.
Yeah.
No, look, go ahead and look for a test online for it, because chances are this computer is doing 32-bit color, and all of ours are. So we should be able to. It can produce 16 point some odd million colors, and we can only see 4 or so. If I'm not, I could be wrong on the numbers. Okay, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. We can only see around 2 to 4 million colors or something. Normal us. So yeah, go look for the color test. Not there. Yeah. There was one that you just passed on the images.
You just see this as an octave, right? Only.
I see it as a band of color, like a rainbow.
But I mean, see 400 to 800.
Well, nanometers, yeah.
So
that's a little upside down Y for wavelength. Right, remember?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, then lambda, right?
Yeah, lambda.
This discussion
on the lamb again.
Yep.
All right. This discussion about eyeballs has got me reeling in wonderment, thinking about I don't even know what to call it.
Those 3 circles right there. Sorry, buddy. Go ahead.
Plenty. It's okay. There's probably plenty of names for it. But one of the things that gets me thinking about it is the looking glass, the looking sphere, the ball, where I've often had this feeling many different times in my life.
Check the fact check.
That people were looking through my eyes. And like there was people can see through other people's eyes, and we're talking about like remote viewing and stuff like that. But like when you think about what prophets are and what prophecy is, and people predicting the future by scrying, by looking at smoke and how smoke moves, it's fluidity. You can see that it's a process. So the process is moving, and you can also see this process when looking at the wind in the trees. You can see what's about to come because you can hear it, and you can hear when the lulls are, and you can hear when the sound from way away starts heightening up. And so I'm thinking about like ways of how to look through space-time with optics. And it reminds me of those 3 witches that looked inside of the looking ball, the looking sphere. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because
I love the dark crystal.
Yeah.
Sorry, you just put the 3. Or Macbeth. We'll go for Macbeth. Sorry, the 3 witches motif is just awesome. Keep going. I'm just...
Jack Nicholson.
Lots of people read crystal balls, though, and lots of people read, like, coffee cups and tea leaves and all kinds of, entrails, whatever, however, they sticks on the ground, right? That's what I chain. So it's like, why? Yeah, it seems more of like an intuitive interpretation of the feeling that you get with the way that the things are interacting.
Yeah, it's it's not seeing, it's like sensing. You know, it's like deeper than seeing. It's like your inner eye. Almost, you know.
No, right. But some people do. Some people, that's the difference between like clairaudio, clairvoyance. You know what I mean? Like different, like clairaudience people, they hear it. They actually hear something. Wow. People, they know it. They see it. They can be there with it. You know what I'm saying? There's psychometry where you take an object and get the feeling from the object that you're holding. And you draw the intuitive charge just from the object. So there's and many other ways of intuiting or divining through whatever it is, and it's basically boils down to allowing the intuition and then being able to decipher between what is your thought and what is an incoming thought. Like clear away yourself, clear away the ego, and look at the thing and listen to what you're seeing, hearing, feeling. And like how to, so to see something through someone else's eyes is just an interesting thought.
Yeah, like I've had this feeling many multiple times, but it's only been when I was on the brim or on the cusp of discovery, huge discoveries that I'm finding, geometrical correlations and things like this. I have to close my eyes and look away because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like there's people looking at this and trying to find me right now, to look through me to see this. I feel like prophets from days of old have been looking through space-time, through my eyes, describing certain things that are in many different religious texts. And, you know, if you think about us as a continuous organism, like I like to think of humanity as a continuous organism where there's collective memory and things like that, then I don't know, it just kind of this whole sensing and this inner eye is the eye of faith. Faith has eyes that allow you to see the invisible, and faith is the evidence of things not yet seen. So it's kind of like when you go into this state or this mode, it's like you're going into faith mode, which faith is almost, it's kind of tantamount to eternity or infinity in my eyes. I know there's an infinite amount of infinities, but faith and eternity I kind of hold as synonymous in my perspective, because I find the same solace there when confronting reality on a day-to-day basis.
You can argue there's only one infinity.
Right, and then one reality or one electron, you know.
But that,
Okay, so buddy,
that might be our limited or finite thinking about infinity.
That tetrahedron that you posted a little while ago that was like reflective inside with all the lights moving around it.
Mm-hmm.
That.
I think it's a dodecahedron. It's on my Facebook if you want to check it out. There's actually some good topical things right now.
Look at
It's
that.
a 12-sided dice. That's what it is. We've all played D&D, so we're cool.
Well, but it's the way that the light is coming through it.
If you look at the first two posts, it has to do with eyeballs.
Yeah. This thing?
Yeah,
that one's good.
Very cool.
Check that out.
But I just read on that little site there, we were just looking, and it said only 2 or 3 people in the entire world have been identified with that fourth cone.
Yeah,
So
I would imagine you'd have to go to an optometrist or an ophthalmologist, have them actually like look and you know what I mean.
yeah,
In
I
your
assume
eyes.
that
Actual testing for it, not like a. Because we all, I mean, the Munsell color scale and all of those things, like those tests. But it's like how often are people actually medically tested for this?
And well, women do have color sensitivity. That's I heard. Now let me just be what I heard. Now I'm beginning to see where the confusion might lie. I heard that it was that women are clearly someone who can identify multiple colors. Like guys go, that car is blue, and they would, women will say, oh no, it's more this color, and we're like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't even get that. I don't even understand what that color is. Like, what's the difference between purple and mauve? I have no idea.
Difference between purple and mauve.
Yeah, but not really to me. Don't get me wrong. I do know that there is a difference. Like but if I couldn't say, oh well, that's taupe or that's teal. Right. I'm like, what? Like, I don't really. I those colors don't register in my brain as much because I never really. I don't want to say never really gave a shit or something. I don't know why, but don't get me wrong. I'm fairly artistic. Like, I mean, generally speaking, but I don't identify the colors. But I do know that if I pointed to my mother or my sister, they could go through a long list of additional colors of blue. Like, I know the good ones, like azure blue, and I know sky blue, and I know, okay, this is more electric blue or something like stuff like that.
But we might say it's a cerulean or it's a cobalt, and then that might be like a variation of each of those, like
exactly
as blues.
Yeah, like when you say cobalt, I'm thinking of a translucent purple kinda, but I don't know what that might be. That I could be just imagining it. I don't know if you guys play with more colors or the dolls have more names on them or whatever.
It's a good one for Buddy because of the house painting and everything. The subtlety between like the wall color, is really it ends up being a real significant thing as far as how you're impressed in your life because you have it over time. But they're very difficult to tell apart when you just look at swatches.
I've actually the same situation before. Just a second, buddy, because trust me, I won't argue after this. But I saw the same situation you're talking about, David, with regards to in the movie Fight Club, actually, when they're going through the room and adding prices on everything in the room that he bought, the main character bought, as they're going through and showing little things. But in that movie, even though it looks like it has no CGI in it, it's filled with CGI. And one of the things was adding those things in the room. And they had to take into account the way the light would reflect off the walls with this new object there. So they couldn't just add it digitally into the scene. They had to basically adjust all the light on all the furniture around it that got changed because it was placed in the scene. And that was something that, for example, I would not think about, but how they had to think about. Anyway, this is where I was getting the idea of this actually having 4 cones and being able to see all those colors and being way more sensitive is something that obviously people like Buddy and like Heather would probably be compared to people like me. I'm done now. Go, Buddy.
So I think a lot of it, you're right. I think a lot of it has to do with sensuality and your senses. I believe I have devised a way of how to teach people how to become synesthetes. I believe synesthesia is a learned condition that can be fostered. I've been doing this therapy that I started. It's basically my ethos. It's my philosophy, and I've been doing it for quite some time, and I've been gradually all of the senses have been merging into one collectively as I collectively work with all different mediums as an artist. When you're working with music, when you're working with painting, when you're composing movies and motion picture, you see that the rhythm is in all of the things, and there could be transchromatic colors that we can't see. Like there was a post on Thunderbolt's project about rainbows beyond the rainbow in very fine mist in the sky. There's more layers and colors to the rainbow. I think I posted it if you want to scroll down when you get a moment or whatever, but we don't have to.
I was digging this.
So this, my ideas here about how color and senses work and how they relate to your brain, I kind of want to transition into this idea that I've been thinking about, which is the platypus, how it electrically senses its environment. It sees with electricity. It feels it, and it wires its brain so that it interprets that information as its reality. A dog will sniff and interpret its entire reality, and its brain will grow, and it will know things based off of smells.
Right.
Like our prefrontal cortex is based off of our eyes and our optics, at getting being our predominant one of our predominant senses. Now, how you mix all these together, and you actually start seeing numbers and hearing letters and tasting sound, comes directly by strength training your senses. I've started something called sense therapy. I've since changed the name to transsensory therapy, because you have to transcend your senses, and a lot of hallucinatory drugs help you transcend your senses, you might not even know that that's something that can happen until you try some of these entheogens for yourself. And then it reminds you about this reality that's there that is more real than the reality you're experiencing, because our realities have been completely constructed to fit narratives for whatever type of interests or whatever is inflicting you. If you're in North Korea, you're going to think one way, you're going to think different ways in many different countries. But this all goes back to the ability to see the transchromatic colors, the trans smell, the transsensory, like extend your bioplasmic field and start seeing with your outer body and you can do this from inner places, you can do it from outer places, inner spaces, outer spaces. And this is relatively new type of technology, because it's a technology. We're accessing our brain on higher levels. And like Ingo Swann, I heard him, an interview with him, with George Norrie on Coast to Coast. And it was rare because he rarely talked to many people, and rarely gave interviews, but he's the guy, basically the father of it. And I was warned about this stuff when I was a little kid, just to not get in it and stuff. I was raised Lutheran and whatnot, but stay away from the New Age and whatnot. But now I'm seeing that there is these clear tunnels, and it's almost like they're Birkeland currents. They are charge, and we have the ability to access these channels of charge that are fractating in eternality. And we can go inside of them. That's what the geometry of the Doherty set is. That's what the geometry of Birkeland currents and what Donald Scott is on to. This is how all information from one system communicates to all information from another system, whilst creating stars along on the string of the information embedded into concretions. And I mean, sorry, I got sort of tangential on that, but this vision, Alex Gray is a visionary artist, and when you look at his work, you know it. You know that guy is telling you things that you've never been able to explain, and he's telling you these things with images. And art always surpasses the sciences, the current sciences of the day. It transcends them. The artist or also the geometer transcend culture through their insight, this inner vision. And when you start to look at all of these different senses and you put them together, you are able to transcend all of them. And then you start to remember there's a sense of balance, there's a sense of belonging, there's a sense of being, there's a sense of becoming. Our five senses are so damn limited to our materiality that it's disgusting. And when you really break into your true inner light that's connected to the mycology of the whole world, saying that like as in the tendrils of mycology and mushrooms and how they work. If you think about it, mushrooms are the end of the phase cycle that brings new life. And it's just ironic, the shape of it, once again. And of course, Alex Gray's stuff is littered with eyes. Love is watching. I mean, always. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But
Looks like something by Tool.
Tool's awesome. I posted something about them being sacred.
They were totally into it, right?
Yeah, Danny Carey is the best drummer ever, bar none. But what it's trying to say that our five senses, or however many, but let's just say on a physical level, for practicality's sake, you have five senses. Like whatever ethereal other senses, whatever conscious other senses, emotional, whatever other senses of different aspects, we are all at this point in time living within a physicality. And so in order for us to in our dense physicality understand what we're seeing, so there you go, you're translating what you're feeling, what you're tasting, what's out there into something you can visually, physically see that already exists, that's already there. I didn't see anything different in that rainbow than any other rainbow. The misconception that we commonly tell ourselves is that a rainbow is a two-dimensional form, and it isn't. It's very much a three-dimensional object. And you might just get to see it at the angle that the light refracts into the depth of it. And then oh my God, there's more rainbows in there. Well, of course there is. It's a three-dimensional object. It's actually several millions of three-dimensional objects interacting with each other. And that's the part of the artist to be able to understand, because we are looking at those little differences where we're trying to measure things and how they light up. Yes, Neil, every single object in a room is a reflection of the light and shadow around it. And it will have great implications on how other things are sitting in space. So if I'm trying to realistically translate that space to you, I have to consider all of those things. We have to consider all of those things. And in the dissection of those things for that translation, we see all of the parts. And so we want to show you those individual parts. What Alex Gray is showing you is the mechanics of those parts he's seeing. He's not covering them up and making them into the physical thing that you are used to seeing, which has some kind of magic depth, magic realism to it that the viewer doesn't quite understand how we got there, how the artist got there. We got there by taking it apart into its spaces. And this is what, by having abstract art, by having modern art, by having these types of things, he can show you where the geometry in it lies. He can show you how the sound is interacting with things around it. He's showing you the fields in a physical form. So you can ingest them and you can take them in too. And I by absolutely no means find that vile or disgusting, that these are our physical boundaries and that we are here to understand ourselves within them and what the exterior is. So if we are to relate anything, everything has to go through our cones and rods. Everything has to go through our nervous system. Everything has to go in some way through our physicality at this point. And I think it's absolutely beautiful.
I didn't think anything was disgusting. Did I?
He said it was. So that was in response to Buddy saying it was disgusting that we have to see everything through or feel everything.
I thought you were still talking to me. I'm like, and Neil, and then I was just like listening.
The object.
I was like, no, that's cool. That's cool. Oh no, that's fine. What I was getting at some of these was the. Was sort of the in a picture that says more than one thing. Like, for example, the Obama picture has the world in the middle of the forehead, but it's also where the third eye would be, and the idea of enlightenment, and then the hopes and dreams poured through this gentleman. Yes. That was sort of, that's how I inferred that. There's a motherly one that's showing a lot more depth. There's teeth there that were like, there's all of this. See sexual energy of that green girl over there, but yet at the same time nature, because it's all green and has a flowery head, and the sinisterness of different types of thought. I see a lot of inference in here. As someone who appreciates art like this, usually I don't get to see something visual on this level unless it's a movie that's a well done movie, or music. Music for me has so many layers. Like a good song has, well, we were just talking about that, buddy. Like it inspires something in you. It has, it can, like, I think one of the strongest connections between this is music and dancing
and memory.
Well,
music, dancing, memory. Yeah.
there's a connection.
There's a huge connection.
There's a connection because people, like, for example, if you want people to dance, you just turn down the lights so their visual is lower. They don't have as much to see, and they're influenced by the music, and they'll just start moving. Like
yes.
you can't help it. It's a kinesthetic connection to the sound.
Yep.
And
I actually have. Can I say something real quick?
I'm done. That was pretty much it for me. I was.
Perfect. So I have this theory actually, and I want to test this. This is something that we can totally test, or someone can. But if you go out into nature and like when the frogs first start peeping, the spring peepers, you go out and you play different frequencies, and you can affect their mating with the music that you play. Just like us. I'm assuming you can do this with all creatures. Oh, check this out. There's mating seasons. Okay? They come into season, which kind of tells you that it might be a frequency thing. And there's many different things that will not have sex unless they're in season, and then they don't want anything to do with the other person or the other partner the whole year round. Or they'll go years without it, and then just once, one conception, one consummation, and it happens. But yeah, you can control people's behavior with music constantly, easily. I have this really crazy book that was written by Walter Russell's neighbor called The Misuse of Music, and it talks about all the crazy characters and queens and like prestigious people that would come to Walter and Leo's house. It's called The Conspiracy of 30, Misuse of Music from Aristotle to Onassis, Virginia Davis Edwards. But yeah, you can control. I mean, this is the weird thing. We could be being controlled by music. Everybody, all the time. There's reality tunnels that could be being fed to us from the other planets, from Birkeland currents and from energy fields. And how you tap into them is based off of your habits. The habits that you do will promote you towards certain deeds and certain types of frequencies. And that's why it's so hard to stultify or to kill habits, because we're habitual by nature. We are man of station, women, humans of station. We turn the station a little bit and our frequency changes. You can get into any addiction and get out of any addiction if you have the self-discipline and self-control to do this. This is what sense therapy is. This is what transsensory therapy is. You are constantly replacing old addictions with new addictions. And there is an infinite number of new first-time things that you can do all day long. First time to jump on a pogo stick. First time to run while you're peeing. First time to, there's a million different things that you can do as a first-timer to help grow your senses. And if you focus on one color for a month, you'll see it everywhere. If you change your clothing, the clothing that you wear, the colors pop out. They mimic you. They attract you like attracts like. And I've done this as a psychological experiment my whole life. Very colorful outfits, and I'll notice that if I'm wearing orange and green, that orange and green things will pop out more vividly than I've ever seen them in my life. And I've liked to pay attention to these little details because it's the minutia and the anomalies that will direct you towards like more curiosities. So, like, for example, a daylily, green and orange. Green and orange is a combo that I wear, and total power combo, love it. And But yeah, anything. You wear yellow and black, the stoplight, the stop signs, and everything will that's caution will stand out. And I don't know why, and I'm sure there's some psychology about this. I guarantee there has to be some psychology already written about this. But yeah, it's about overcoming. Overcoming what? Why are we here, really? And what are we overcoming? And I'm curious, personally, I'm curious about the overcomer's rewards inside of Revelation and the Bible. When you look at why are these rewards promised from God? And these rewards all have to do with overcoming. What are we overcoming? Sin. Sin is just ignorance. Basically, you keep doing the same repetitive thing and you can't stop yourself. So how do you stop this? And how do you gain these rewards? How do you get these crowns? How do you move ahead? How do you transcend your senses so that you can become a being of light, become farther out into eternity? You know, I believe you grow towards God. And the more you grow towards God or the source, the more you get to know who you are. Yourself will be revealed in your climb. Otherwise, you don't know who you are. Aside from what people tell you about yourself and people's reaction, because that's how we gain our ego. What people say, people's reaction, what we think of ourselves, and that builds up all sorts of false premises. But if you're growing towards the source, then you're growing and glowing, illuminating towards this divine eternality. And as you climb through this, the layers of your senses will bend and snap and rip you into new spaces, new uneven imagined places that you can then teach other people how to get to and what is there, instead of all of these people tripping out on DMT and saying, I see fairies, I see elves, I see, these what are these like jester characters? They're everything is just a circus. It's a circus when you're out there, when you're out in this place. This is part of our home. We have access to this. We don't need to be on drugs to get there. People do dance. People to hallucinate. People have been doing it since the beginning of time. They used to dance until they got into some sort of hypnagogic state where they're almost convulsing and seeing things, and then the visions that they would have and ride out would be akin to the visions that shamans have on ayahuasca and stuff like that. I mean, all this goes back to plants. Every single drug that we have, plants. Cocaine, plant. Heroin, plant. Poppies, all of them. And now we're making synthetic drugs based off of them and stuff. But what is this language that's beyond our sensory perception that we hold ourselves inside in a tiny little box because we want to be safe? It's about not being safe and about being vulnerable and about always changing. My philosophy is adapt to change. My definition of genius is the ability to have enough patience to adapt to change, because all things can change, but are you going to have the patience to see it through to a successful transition? So, color, light, let's transcend it. Senses, everything. Love it.
Thanks, buddy. I like that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, tangile this morning. Is it still morning?
Good.
Oh no.
Yeah. There was it had sermon elements to it.
I felt very McKenna-ish.
So it's very fun to be traipsing through some of Alex Gray's work there. So.
Yeah, while letting Buddy talk. Yeah, I'm just sitting here going. Speaking of DMT, I'm pretty much on that right now, just watching these.
Yeah. I had something I put up with McKenna for the meetup on Tuesday, but they've been posting a ton of stuff on him recently. It's the YouTube scavenger that I am.
Well, every time you say stuff like that now, I'm going, are they going to release a Terrence McKenna movie? Is this all underground stuff? Really? Is this feeding the idea? Is this, underground marketing, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. And what's going on with Jim Carrey with it, that
yeah,
whole thing.
I think if Jim Carrey played him, a lot of people would be turned off right away. Unfortunately, I love him to death, but there's a lot of people that just don't like him.
Don't like who? Jim Carrey?
Jim Carrey.
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
and then on another token, there's probably a lot of people that don't like Terrence McKenna too because he's such a badass.
I don't see a problem with either.
Yeah.
Besides,
his knowledge, the thing that's excuse me, just one second. The thing that really strikes me with McKenna is that you don't really realize until you kind of go spend some time searching around and getting his material is how deep a scholar he is. He's really particularly with that particularly alchemy, by the way, and it's this has been a certain area that of my antennas have poked up, as you know, a bit. But he's really, really super knowledgeable about the history of it and details of it. And rather than as a tool of manipulating material, the classic, all they wanted to do was turn lead into gold kind of thing. It's much more about consciousness and about reaching the things that Buddy was talking about through things like studying symbols and ancient geometry, etc. So it's really, really fascinating.
I've recently been watching the Full Metal Alchemist, so I'm understanding it through anime.
Alchemist. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it anime?
It is. It's ridiculous, but it's very funny. But I'm learning the principles. It's one of those anime that basically what the guy did is it like any other anime, because they don't. Like alchemy is something that's foreign, right? And it's like it's just like if we talked about ancient feudal Japan, so they're talking about ancient feudal Europe, like across the ocean, and they're trying to explain the principles of alchemy through an anime, that's just sort of like what everything hangs on, because the magic is all based on alchemy in this world. Long story short, so the point is that he's like going, it's the principle of equivalent exchange. And they were like going, so anything that you must sacrifice something else for this and blah, 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 blah. And of course you could see where this leads to the main character getting in a bunch of trouble, and his brother is a suit of armor now, and he's lost an arm and a leg because they try to bring someone back to life, yada, yada, yada. The story continues. So, but they're always going through this whole thing. It goes, it's the Full Metal Alchemist. Which is hilarious because he's like 14 apparently, and he's like a master already, but at least I know the principles. Enemies are just that way. They're crazy. So you have to sort of deal with that.
I'm surprised
I know, eh?
It's a gateway, right?
Well, that's how I learn things sometimes. I mean, I did. Like I said, we were just talking about the Eva thing before on the other, and that's the same thing. It's all about Christianity, but from the Japanese point of view, and put it into aliens attacking the planet through Christianity. I thought that was just the weirdest thing I've ever seen, especially when they fight it with giant mechs. I'm like,
yeah, right.
Well done. I never saw that mixture ever before. Like you don't see that. It's just something that you wouldn't see in your culture. I mean, you would never do that. We would have in fact we have giant like samurai robots, basically making a mockery of their heritage, and they do the same thing to us. They make a mockery of our heritage because they don't know it. It's just to them. This would be nothing to them because they don't even read our language. They would just go, oh, what's this? So the only thing that they would get would be from, something like that, like just a connection that sort of drags it in, and then they might look it up online, and then, oh, this is what alchemy was. Did you know Sir Isaac Newton was in? Sir Isaac Newton, really?
Yeah,
because they know him because they know
the
math.
Text that you get in school. I really find this really kind of like the big pointer to the dogmatism in our education system, particularly in sciences. But it's how they present Newton's interest in alchemy. It's like there's a very strict dividing line between his Principia and then anything else he was doing, as putting it out as he was actually he had pathological psychological problems, because he was dancing with alchemy. And I got this.
He had deep psychological problems because he did tests with mercury.
Yeah, and then but I don't know if you ran into it. I certainly did, and it caused me to adapt that position for many years. Oh, that was crazy, but why were they? Look at how much more sophisticated we are now. This is a 180-degree turn for me. It's like to start looking at it, and then have just this amazing richness in it of perspective, because it was mischaracterized ultimately.
Well, do I agree that it was mischaracterized?
Yeah.
Well, it's basically just science, but
this is empiricism, right?
Well,
this
is
where this is the split between and here's another one that's come up, the repeatability of an experiment, the ability to do empirical tests, right? So the person who puts together the sophisticated empirical test with this super sophisticated measuring device ultimately gets dibs on the explanation, and the explanation is independent of what they're measuring, and then they get this result. But they're trying to support some explanation of it. However, there's not a natural unbroken chain between what the experiment's measuring and the explanation.
Okay, well, usually, and you're right on that. In fact, this is why Newton said, I frame no hypothesis, I just note the effect and what it is, when he was talking about gravity, because he wasn't inventing a theory of gravity, he was just talking about the fact that gravity exists. Here's how it works. And that was basically all he did, and that is putting a mathematical formula, which was the whole purpose of Principia de Mathematica that he wrote, the mathematical principles of nature, or I think that's the name of it anyway. And it basically was the foundation of physics. But what he was going before, I mean, to learn alchemy was basically what passed for science with the Aristotle-like logic put in there, and then moved up through the ages with what they knew. Okay? But the revolution that he caused basically caused all of this to be rethought, and then you end up having the foundations of the new sciences and so on. And that was only what you can prove using what we would consider now the scientific method, and trying to remove all overtones of occultism and religion from it, which is what happened. And there was sort of like a shaking of the hand. You guys control the mind, we control the matter. You good? We good? Okay. And that's kind of how they went, because the universities were getting more and more powerful as they were able to challenge papal authority and other things like that. Because there was a reason economically to run these schools, because the people who came out of them could do shit. And that was the important part, is you could actually build things, and it made people money. So there's a whole thing, when you could prove something was real.
Commerce aspect of it, right?
I mean, just simple things. For example, the guy that held two horses together with two halves of a metal sphere, and as hard as the horses would pull on this ball that was only touching the metal sphere together, that's all it was doing, was just the edge of the two halves were touching together. It could not be pulled apart by two horses. But the guy walked over and pulled a plug, and instantly the two things fell apart because he had a vacuum in there. He had made a pump and to pull it. So he said, air pressure's a thing. It's real. Shit, this stuff works. That didn't seem like much at the time, but fast forward just a little bit and you have scuba gear. So it was quite, which was invented here, by the way, for some reason. I don't know why. The 1700s, we in New Brunswick invented scuba gear. I don't understand how that happened, but anyway, awesome. It's stuff like that. It's just little, and of course you begin to, light refracting. Suddenly you have not just perspective drawing, but optics and, making telescopes. Well, that was a good thing because that's how Galileo started making real money, because he built telescopes for people so they could see ships coming in further away, so they could run down the stairs and go to the market and set the prices before anyone else did. And so obviously the guy with the best telescope could see right to the horizon. Well, you need a taller tower, of course, but you have to identify the flags on the boats so you could see what boat's coming back. It's totally amazing how much. Then this is just why you needed science. It was a way of making money, and it was worth it. And lo and behold, after a little while, you have sawmills and everything else. So things were taking a mighty turn for the so-so. But this is, just why.
But it was its own. I mean, I hear what this I find, always seeking for chinks in the armor, of course. But it's like it actually created its own type of reverence for materialism.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So this is actually deification of materialism.
Well, yeah, but it had a practical application. We're hitting the end of the practical application now.
Very nice word, and so it's pragmatic, but they're very nice, and I understand them in order to get something to work, quote unquote. But the ramifications are immense, and then you start getting an economy that demands itself to be grown at 5% a year in order to be considered viable. You could see you've created something that's just going to run off the rails eventually.
Oh God, yes, and of course we're seeing the end of that. But we're also, like you said, seeing the end of return on investment. You have to spend several $1 billion to get the next. You have to build the next, LIGO or the next CERN to try to detect something now. And they built a giant thing underground to detect neutrinos or muons or something. Never detected shit. And so this is like, your theory's wrong. In fact, now things are literally yelling at us. Your theory's wrong. You got to stop here. And rethink your whole thing. And I'm having debates with people online, obviously, talking about quantum physics and going, well, here's your fucking problem. You're into this aspect of you're not taking everything into account. And as much as I can admit that all matter is made of waves of energy and nothing's really touching, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that doesn't mean though that that they see it that way, or that there is or that the practical approach, spending money to get new advances, it's hitting the end of its theory. It's hitting the end of materialism in a way, because we're leaving that idea into a much more comprehensive, especially when we're talking about morphic fields and other things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting title he's using here. Anyway, Jim, I don't know, Jim, did you make it on, Jim?
Yeah. It is.
Yeah, I got cut off for a bit and I'm back in.
Oh, cool.
Yay.
Cool.
I just want to say something interesting that you brought up the title, that it is optics or a treatise, like seeing. The occultists were actually, like, there's like an extra C, so the occultists, the hidden, and then there's the oculists.
Mm-hmm.
One C.
Uh-huh.
And it was about seeing. They were seers. Seeing.
Right.
It was about the eye.
Yeah. The play of C with S was interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jim brought this up. Last week or so. These questions. I thought they were pretty interesting. But that, you know, he posits these questions. The 16 is when a man in the dark presses either corner of his eye with his finger, he turns his eye away from his finger to see a circle. I used to do this when I was a kid. You know? I don't know if anyone else has done that, but it's like that was my initial diving into altered states.
Pushing your eyeballs.
Have you ever done that? Put pressure on your eyeballs.
Yeah. I think we've all done this.
Like rubbing your eyes a whole lot until you see something.
Right, exactly. But he's Newton talking about this. So.
Well, you should talk about this. This is interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was just actually, okay, I'm going to out myself a little bit, but I was watching Fear the Walking Dead earlier, and there was a mention of that, like that Newton stabbed himself in the eye to better understand color.
Really? It's like Van Gogh.
Yeah, totally.
Jim, what was because this was really cool. What was your feel? What was your read on this stuff?
Oh, sorry, I missed about 2 minutes of the call, but it was right after you brought up Newton and Alchemy, and then that's when I got dropped.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
How long have you been back in?
Well, about 2 minutes now.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is that article that you brought up with the queries that he was making about light.
Yeah, all his queries are actually interesting. I mean, they would be to our group. It's all the things that he wasn't able to prove before he was done. I mean, that's he left out all at the end, and a lot of them were kind of like rhetorical questions where he thought he knew the answer, but they were still. This was all after his theory of gravity and everything. But a lot of that's the more metaphysical and alchemical parts of his work.
Mm-hmm.
But there were so many things different back in those times that they didn't talk about that were actually more interesting, because we've forgotten, like, the whole idea that there might have been this smaller scale substance. I mean, that pretty much they all accepted that. That's why there weren't so many arguments against it. And one of the ideas in Newton's day is pretty much everybody, even if it was just from their the more fundamentalist Christian beliefs of the day, they all believed that they were in kind of the dark ages, that beginning with Adam, everyone was more connected with God. But the idea was all of them looked to the past to try to dig up pieces of the truth and try to put things back together. In other words, no scientist back in the 17 and 1800s would have thought that they were the epitome of what's out there to know. They all knew that their ancestors had more knowledge. That was common knowledge. That wasn't even something they argued about. But that's something that we kind of, we've gotten away from that since then. But they didn't discuss that because it was just a almost taken for granted belief that all these guys had. And you can see that in their writing when they're trying to look up at, whether they were trying to research the Bible or other cultures' religious texts. I mean, they were just assumed that people had this knowledge that they had to put back together. And a lot of that comes up, though, in the queries, things that he says are true that he can't prove again, but he knows from the past that this is the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, between Rome and the church, things were pretty nasty in Europe after that, yeah.
That was a brutal, I mean, it's just that as far as like immense crimes on humanity, it's like the ability for people in power to destroy writings and the history. You know? Of course, this is the nature of the thing, of the beast, but it's like this one continues to come up for me as just the loudest crime on humanity. You
know? The burning of the Library of Alexandria still pisses everyone off, and it happened like 2,000 years ago.
Right.
It's just one of those situations. So Rome did some nasty stuff. Church did some nasty stuff, but thank God for the Byzantine Empire, who went, you want knowledge again? Oh, well, we have all these books here. Would you like them? Oh, thank you very much. Yay, we've relearned optics. Thank you, the ancient Greeks.
Right. So the one thing we started out with that you didn't catch that I thought was pretty interesting was of course I get popped whenever Ken Wheeler puts out a new video and stuff, but the one he brought up was that, like, you magnetize things with a coherent magnetic field, of course, which you've seen, like high Gauss magnetic field onto an object, you can magnetize it, right? So they were playing around with cockroaches. So they found that if you magnetize a living cockroach, the magnetization stays for about 50 minutes. But you can magnetize a dead cockroach, and it stays magnetized for 47 hours. So this is an interesting little piece. They did it at Cornell. It was back February of last year. But that's
why is that surprising, though?
I find it an interesting, like, I'm always looking for. There's a bit of a hypothesis that I've been running with, and it's the bioelectrical model, or quote unquote, does not match our formal electrical engineering model. So why not? Why aren't they the same? And this, to me, points in that direction. So.
Okay. And here I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate. The reason I would automatically assume, without going into that, although what you're saying doesn't seem to bother me very much, that probably is a very large factor. But because you just brought it up, but the first instinct to me was, well, it probably shouldn't, since anything you magnetize, if it starts to move, it's gone. So, like, for example, you can't magnetize liquid iron, for example, because you can't hold everything in place to allow the electrons to spin around, and do their thing. So I would think that a living creature would also prevent that. Once it's dead, things will start congealing, things will stay the same, that type of thing. There'll be no
pretty significant
movement.
Difference in time, though, wouldn't you say?
Well, I've never really thought about living and dead cockroaches had magnetism. First time I brought it up.
Well, you're kidding, you didn't?
No, it's no.
That's a bird bound. But you see, to me, it's like, okay, there's a circulatory system within the cockroach, right? So how much of the cockroach? Let's get into proportions of the cockroach, right? So how much of that is how much material is moving within him to rearrange those? Yeah. Anyway, you can get down a rabbit hole pretty quickly.
Yes.
I just found it from a perusal. I thought it was pretty interesting.